Does Ohio State have a Ryan Day problem?
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Some of you out there heard that question and you thought, man, you are crazy. Why would you ask that? Well, tap into today's show and hear all about why that's a valid question to ask. Welcome in, Buckeye fans, to a Wednesday edition of Locked On Buckeyes here on Wednesday, January 3rd, in the new year in 2024. I am your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast, and I want to thank you for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen or first watch of every single day. Joining us today during one of the oddest times that Jeff and I have ever done a show was Jeff Hunt. He is now not retiring the podcast. It's unretired. He's the host of the Jeff Neese Sports Podcast. You can hear him all across the Off the Ball Network. And before we bring Jeff in, I want to make this comment and answer the question I just asked. Does Ohio State have a Ryan Day problem? Absolutely, yes, they do.
Yes, I think it's obvious at this time that we don't. It's the question mark is obligatory at this point. Like, there's absolutely a Ryan Day problem. Again, thanks for having me on, Jay. I said it before the show. I wish we could go back in time 10 years. We'd have had a lot more fun doing these shows. But this is what we got. Here, the one statement that I will say for Buckeye Nation is that I hope that we've realized that we've hit rock bottom, but the record's only 11-2. Like, that's a good place to be. You don't want to let this thing drag out any farther. You don't want to, turn a blind eye anymore. You don't want to, say, oh, next year anymore. Like, you got to realize now at 11-2, things are not going great for Ohio State football.
I didn't expect Jeff to come on here and immediately at the top of the show be the voice of reason to say, guys, we're 11-2. It's rock bottom. That's where we are. But that's where we are with this show and Jeff and where his mind currently is with the state of Ohio State football. Jeff, it's not fun right now coming on here after losing to the team up north a month ago. Whatever that nonsense was, they watched in the Cotton Bowl. It's not fun coming on here and discussing if Ohio State has a Ryan Day problem. We talked previously, and I said, I'm not ready to let him go just yet. I think he's fine. I'm off the bandwagon, bro. I'm off of it. There's a problem in Ohio State. Ryan Day is part of the problem. And if the solution is getting rid of him, I understand why that is possibly the solution.
So something I thought of earlier, and I keep trying to come up with, like, because I understand, like, you can throw out the percentages at me and all that. I don't care. Like, we watch the games. I think everybody's in agreement now, that there's an issue. And so the only thing I can pinpoint, and I've said this since the day that they gave Ryan Day the job. Not he didn't earn, like, I won't say he didn't earn it, but like, he was there. He's in position. They gave him the job. I honestly think that he is a good football coach. He's a quality football coach.
Absolutely.
But two things. He's a football coach that needs players that are already self-motivated. Like, he's a pro coach. Like, you bring in Justin Fields, who is ready to go, well, then things are going to go good. Yeah. CJ Stroud, who's ready to go, things are going to go good. When he had to take so much effort to drag McCord through this season and teach him and come along together, then you saw what was left over. Obviously, Devin Brown had made no progress through the season. Obviously, the Kleinholtz doesn't even. I'm not even sure he was at practice. So, like, Day is a coach of players that are already ready to make that next step. What college football coaches have to be, or a staff has to be, or as a group that makes the players better, teaches them how to be self-motivated, teaches them how to think. I think that Ryan Day thinks he does a great job in practice, but I think the reason that guys specifically like Jim Trestle and Urban Meyer succeeded is because they started at the very bottom, the ground up, and they saw what it took to fight and claw to be a good football team, to overcome better football teams, to overcome even equal talent. Like, all these things, when you start, like, Ohio State cannot be your first coaching job, because, like, you have all the talent, all the tools in the world, especially with the portal and NIL and all this. Like, it's about, like, the big time jobs are about taking, great players and getting to the notch above. And what Urban Trestle did was took good players and got the most out of them, taught them how to think for themselves and taught them how to be players. You could see what happened, in that bowl game was like, once your top tier guys, your leaders, so to speak, were gone, there was nobody to pick up the pieces. Nobody was in charge. There was no second plan. There was no fallback. There was none of that. It really exposed the type of coach that Ryan Day is. If you tell me Ryan Day is going to bring in all this ready talent and make a run at it, I believe you. But sometimes you got to get the talent ready. The guys that leave Ohio State aren't any better than the guys that come into Ohio State. I know that was long-winded, but it was Friday night's all you need to see.
Jeff, there's one thing that you mentioned when you mentioned Jim Trestle that is underrated about him as a head football coach. He gets all the attention about what he did at Ohio State, beating Miami. Some say he killed the dynasty, and great. There's narratives and conversations and maybe a 30 for 30 down the road about that thing that happened there in that, 02, 03, whatever it was, Fiesta Bowl, BCS National Championship game. But one thing that's underrated about him, Jeff, he won multiple national championships at Youngstown State before coming to Columbus. And he was there, and I just looked this up to get the exact dates and numbers. He was at Youngstown State as the head coach, not in an assistant role, from 1986 until the year 2000. So he's not just winning. You mentioned it, figuring out how to get guys where they are, bring them up to a different level, and then bring them up to a level that they didn't think they could play at and get everything you could out of them. So I do understand why people complain about Ryan Day and say, well, Ryan Day is his first head coaching job. It's hard as Ohio State. But, Jeff, you said something that's very true. It can't be your first head coaching job. This isn't like any other program in the country. You may say, Jay, is it different than Alabama? Absolutely. USC? Absolutely. I don't think Ohio State would have ever dealt with the Clay Helton era at USC like USC did. I think you give 2 years of that, maybe, or maybe a year. I don't know, but I don't think that Ohio State would have dealt with that like they did out there in Southern California. Jim Trestle, those years where he figured out, one, how to be a head coach in college football, how to recruit, 3, how to win, 4, how to do it consistently. That all came into effect when he moved from Youngstown State to Ohio State. He learned a lot of things there at Youngstown that helped him at Ohio State. And I think Ryan Day, in his first job as a head coach at any level, he's learning. 2 losses at this university ain't going to cut it. But I think he's also learning. He's made a lot of mistakes over the past couple of years, made a lot of mistakes over the past month that have us having these conversations today about him as Ohio State's head coach.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, and everybody, throws out the record at us. But here's the real deal. He's lost these last 2 games, the last 2 years in a row. So the 2 most important games of the year, he's lost them. I don't care what they look like in that Georgia game. Awesome. I put most of that on C.J. Stroud. If you want to pin a moral, if you want to pin a moral victory on the Georgia game, give it to C.J. Stroud. That was not a Ryan. If anything, Ryan Day got in the way. So, and then, he loses the big game to Oregon. He loses, 3 in a row to Michigan. He's got the last game that we really felt good about was 2020 playoffs versus Clemson. That's the last time that we felt like we overcame, like the Notre Dame win this year was good. Last year was all right. But really the last time we felt good about yes, this team can be dominant was 2020 versus Clemson. That's just the realism of it. Yes, he hasn't lost another Big Ten team. Yeah, most teams don't. Again, if you want to root for a team that's really good and wins most of their conference games and goes to a bowl game that can't lead to a championship, that's fine. Ryan Day's your guy. I will give you that. That this is not where we're at. This is a team that all summer we hear about how hard they're working. All summer we hear about the recruits. All summer we hear about this and the anger. We've heard for 4 years now how angry they were and how they were going to beat Michigan. And they've got tossed around for 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
These teams don't have the fire. They don't have the anger. And I don't blame the players, because I will guarantee you that in practice they think they're doing what they need to do. Because if you're a young player, you haven't played under Urban Meyer, you haven't played under Nick Saban, you haven't played under these Kirby Smart. Like, you think like we're doing everything we can do to win this game. That this is why when these guys come into a program and turn it up a notch, like we saw happen to Oregon this year, we saw happen to Washington recently. Like, we see all these teams that we, take it up a notch. You're like, oh, okay, that's different. Like, you got to get, like, if you tell a kid they're doing their best and they believe you, then that's the end of it. You know what I mean? Like, they have to know, they have to fight, they have to claw. Like, I don't know. At some point, that's got to be instilled in them.
Jeff, there's a comment that came to my mind, or a thought that came into my mind when you mentioned Washington, when you mentioned Oregon, and it's going to come at you next here on Locked On Buckeyes. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. At the start of the new year, every small business owner is asking themselves the same question. What's the one move I can make that'll take my business to the next level in 2024? LinkedIn Jobs knows that your success all depends on the team you surround yourself with. That's why LinkedIn Jobs has created the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Jeff, this year's Ohio State football team in the expanded Big Ten next year, I think if they had – now, next year's schedule is not going to be the same, because I think next year's schedule is a little soft for Ohio State's benefit. But if they had to play 2 West Coast schools, let's say they have to go to Oregon, and USC comes here with a new quarterback in Lincoln Riley. And actually, think about that. Last time Lincoln Riley came to Columbus, he won the game. So there's more fuel to the fire there with him coming back to Columbus. But then you also have to add in other schools out there in the Big Ten are going to have more of the same talent Ohio State has. So I say all that to say this year's team in an expanded Big Ten might have 2 Big Ten losses before heading to a bowl game. Because if you can't beat Michigan, that's already an L right there. If you are going to struggle with Missouri, you're going to lose to Washington. You're going to lose to Oregon. You're going to lose to USC, and you might fall to UCLA. And UCLA is not Missouri. They're not one of the upper echelon of the sport. But trust me, that's a good football team. Chip Kelly, Ryan Day, they're buddies. If you don't think that Chip Kelly knows how to get the upper hand on Ryan Day, you're crazy. This year's football team would do not bad things. Let me change that. This year's Ohio State football team would struggle when you have all that talent coming from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten next year, which worries me, Jeff, about the future if Ryan Day is the head coach in this present state over the next few years.
Yeah, they've and again, I've said it on your show, I've said it on my show, I've said it on Mo Murphy's show. Like, we've already held on a year too long, and I stand by it. Because here's the thing, to touch on your point, as I watch the games, I'm like, Ohio State, if you just look at bowl season and look at how you prep, look at the talent, look at everything, they looked worse than Oregon, they looked worse than Washington, they looked worse than Michigan, they looked worse than USC, they looked worse than Penn State. Like, at best, they look like the 6th best team, in the Big Ten going forward. Like, and that's an honest assessment. Now, bad. we also talk, to be fair, I know everybody is shouting at the radio right now, and we thank you for listening. And they're throwing stuff. We also agreed that with McCord and Harrison and the team that we had in November, they beat Missouri. I understand that, but I'm just talking about what I saw on the field in the bowl games. Ohio State was the 6th or 7th best Big Ten team I saw. Going into next year. That's a real thing.
Jeff, we have had conversations, you, myself, Mo. One day it's going to be all 3 of us together on one show, and that'll be one monster
That's
show.
got to be a
Kevin.
bigger show. That's a lot of.
Hey, so one thing I realized, I'll get to this start here in a second. I'm long-winded already. All three of us can host solo shows, but whenever we come on somebody else's show, it's like, well, you might need to wait 4 minutes because the guy's going to go on a rant. And Mo's been on here multiple times, 4 minutes, 4.5 minutes. I'm like, hey, bro, just keep going. Let it keep going. Yeah. Let it flow. I love it. But Jeff, I'm kind of concerned, man. I'm really kind of concerned about next year. I've talked a lot about the unproven quarterbacks over the past few weeks, past few months. That's not going to change. We're going to talk quarterbacks here on this show for a long period of time. Once Ryan Day announces a new head coach, assuming he's a head coach next year, we're going to talk about a new starting quarterback. We're going to talk about that quarterback and what to expect from him. But when you think about Ohio State's roster going into next season, running back room in totality, unproven. We know what Henderson, I think I know what Henderson can be. Hayden, spot duty every now and then. Receivers, Abuka's still here, but the rest are unproven. Offensive line, that needs a lot of work. Quarterback is unproven. D-line, Michael Hall Jr. just went to the NFL. I don't know if anybody else is going to declare. They lost a depth piece, and Jaden McKenzie didn't really play that much. Still Chambers off to the NFL. Eichenberg, I believe he's off to the NFL as well. Secondary, not Proctor's gone. I wish we could get him another year with what we got this year. This goes into why I am so nervous. One, about an expanded Big Ten, Jeff, but with the way that Ryan Day has put this roster together, we're going to go into another year. Man, the defense may be more proven than the offense, but another year like we were this year. We got to figure some things out weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4 to hope Ohio State has a shot in the Big Ten championship. It's not a definite thing anymore, which makes me really nervous because defensively, you're going to have some new pieces. I would love to see the jack position, Jeff, on the field, but even that's not seen. I'm nervous about the roster currently because even if you bring in transfers, that culture, the way that it currently is, 1, you're going to have a hard time beating Michigan. 2, you're going to have a hard time winning the Big Ten championship. And 3, you're not winning the Natty.
No, it's crazy. And that's what we want to see in the bowl game. What do we all say about the bowl game going in? Like we understood the situation. We understood everything. Let the young guys play and let's see what happens. We got none of that. Like we didn't get to see, like the defense played hard, but most of the best defenders in that game are leaving. Honestly, I think after the game he put in, I think Sawyer's going to go. I don't know why he wouldn't.
He played phenomenal at the end of the season.
What a game. He'll never play a game better than that. And that's credit to him. As much as, the flack he's taken for, a few years, but, so like most of what you saw in that defense is gone. So like, you can't really worry about that. Now, I do think that Ohio State's talented enough on defense to like they'll roll out guys there, and in a few weeks we're like, oh, they're okay. But here's the problem. You can't play football in this day and age without a quarterback. We don't have a quarterback on this roster that's thrown a meaningful touchdown. Like think about that. We don't have a quarterback on Ohio State's roster that's thrown a touchdown that mattered. That is worrisome. Like you got everything in the basket of hope, and I think we're down now to if like it's Will Howard or bust, right?
Oh god.
Or we're gonna roll with the true freshman. I mean, that's it. That is the scariest part because here's the thing: we saw it with C.J. Stroud his sophomore year. As good as he wound up being, it still bit us early against Oregon. It still bit us against Minnesota. I know me and you talked about it. We did the show after the game. Like. You still you can't fight through those games with a below average quarterback. And that's, so it doesn't matter how good they are in week 12. If you can't get through, like you said, you can't get through weeks, 4, 5, and 6. So that's my biggest problem to go back to what Days did is like the depth and the preparation in this roster. It actually is confusing. It is not a next man up program, but yet it's the biggest football program in the world. Like those two things don't make any sense. It bothers me a ton. Like you should have freshmen and sophomores fighting, stealing time, taking like when under Urban Meyer's regime, for instance, like guys would take positions Like Joshua Perry lost playing time. The all Big Ten Joshua Perry lost playing time because guys just wouldn't give up and like took snaps. Like we're not seeing that. We're seeing this weird 1980s college basketball thing to where like, nope, it's all the upperclassmen and then you guys get some playing time. Then your turn's next. Like that is not college football. Like every other great team in the country is like, oh, if you're good enough, get in there. Like we don't care. And there is no next man up. They don't seem prepared. They don't seem hungry. I don't know what the plan is. It's the roster bothers me a lot because I know there's a lot of talent. Great. Yeah. Awesome. Looks great on your stars and the recruiting sites and all that. But we need to see you develop on the field. Like Sonny Styles should be jumping off the page by the bowl game. That dude should look like everybody right now should be going, oh my gosh, this guy's going to be awesome next year. And it's just like, oh, he was there. You know what I mean? These guys ought to be jumping off the page at us. We ought to have a quarterback, whoever the quarterback was that started next, like Devin Brown should have, just like we saw at USC, Devin Brown should have had 400 yards in that game and been like, I'm ready to go. Win or lose, wouldn't have mattered. But to not even be able to like get a pass off, the offensive line's an absolute train wreck.
Oh my!
Whatever's going on with the
Jeff, that was one of the worst offensive line performances I've seen under Ryan Day. And maybe in my time being a host of this show, I have never seen the O-line play that bad. And for them to say 2 weeks before the bowl game, we're going to switch our center and guard, and our guard is a guy who's a backup who's played maybe 50 snaps all season. I don't care if it's Justin Fry. I don't care if it's Hartline, the OC. I don't care if it's Ryan Day. I don't care who it is. That's one of the worst decisions I've seen since I've been hosting this podcast since the 2020 season. And I hope they had some internal conversations where somebody used some 4-letter words so they really felt how the person was feeling about that decision, because that was atrocious. And to go even further, Jeff, I didn't know this was going to come out now, but I got a little annoyed. The fact that you roll that out there and don't make a change after the first series, stupid. What are we doing? This is Ohio State. This isn't some school at the Group of 5 level or bottom feeder Power 5 school. This is Ohio State. We have seen you have offensive linemen that can play better than that. But for some reason in that game, you thought that was a move so Matthew Jones could get some film at center for the NFL? Well, if that was your plan, it backfired because that was not good film for him for the next level.
Yeah, that's true. If any, every player on the field looks worse for that game. Just a complete meltdown. And again, this is all goes to the coach of like how many times have I said it on your show, Jay? Like, what didn't you see in the summer that led to this? And this is the same thing. What didn't you see after November 25th that led to this? Like, whatever it is you're not seeing is your flaw as a coach. Like, I think you're great on a whiteboard. I bet your X's and O's look great when you draw them up there.
Get him in there with John Gruden on the ESPN. Hey, I'm going to tell you this play. Go in there and draw it. Hey, got his paper and pen, drawing that bad boy up. Like, oh, you're an All-American on the whiteboard. Great.
Yep. And he's a whiteboard coach. Like he doesn't get a feel for the game. He doesn't make adjustments. He can't grit out a game like all these other teams can. Like, again, we talked about it again. Like that was the perfect game. Like that should have been two running back, 2 tight end packages, gritting out 3 or 4 yards, trying to steal field goals. No, you still ran it out of the shotgun when there's no threat of the quarterback.
Goodness. All this
no threat.
Talk about
still running RPOs, and there's zero chance you're going to run it. Missouri didn't. It's not like Missouri was just dropping back. They weren't running stunts. You know what I mean? They were just running straight up. It was, if anything, if I'm Missouri, I'm upset at that game. Like I understand that they got the big Cotton Bowl win and they're happy, but for a half of that game, if I'm a Missouri fan, I'd have been more mad. Like Ohio State literally gave up. In the first quarter, just up and down the board, like essentially conceded the game. And that's fine. Just don't play it. Like if that's how you're going to play that game, just don't play it. Like Ohio State is not better going into spring practice after that bowl game. Like that bowl game did nothing to make that team better going into spring practice. Like a couple of guys like Jack Sawyer might make some money off of it. Burke definitely could make some money. Like Burke's got to go. Like Burke is on top. He does not want to pull a I'm sorry if his name escapes me from a few years ago that stuck around 1 year too long.
Sean Wade.
Sean Wade, don't do that. Burke, go as fast as you can. You're good enough to go to the NFL. There's no reason for you to come back. Sawyer, your tape's nenever going to get better. You're going to look good at the combine. You don't want to be here for what's going to happen next year. Like nothing's going to get better. Just so a couple, that's it. But that's the only guys that benefited. The team did not benefit. Oh, here's what we know. Don't have a quarterback. We don't know who the wide receivers are because when it got to crunch time, all they did was lean on Igbuka. We know Igbuka's good. We know Igbuka's good. Like that didn't do us any good. It just on and on and on. And then I don't know, just how many more press conferences can we hear a day? He says he's been raised by Belichick. He just gives you the, ho hum, blah, 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 blah. Like it's the same thing every time. He's just another dude at coach. Like people need to, I understand how good that 2019 team was, but it's gone, man. It's gone. 2020 was a different animal. Yes, I agree. 2020, they were good. Last year, they had one great game and should have pulled it off. They didn't. I don't know what to say.
Jeff, I got one last thing here for you. We talked about a topic about Ohio State, Georgia, and Alabama. We'll have to save that. It was before the show, Jeff. Go ahead to save that for the next time you come on because we both went on rants and it was they needed this and we needed it too. Somewhat therapeutic. We say it all the time, Jeff. This show has become therapy for us.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's been a rough weekend. I've been venting. Everybody's been asking me today, and I'm giving them. But here's the thing: the one thing that I'll say about Jeff is like, you guys please go back and listen to all Jay's shows, listen to my shows. I have not changed my position on Ryan Day over the last year. Like everything I said about this year. If you go back 365 days when me and Jay did a show, I promise you, this is what I said was going to happen. Like I don't like to toot my own horn, but toot.
Jeff, there's one thing that I noticed, and it was Florida State, Georgia, the Orange Bowl. And we all knew there were going to be guys that were going to be opting out. Didn't know how they would play, but you knew that Florida State would not be the Florida State that they were when they went 13-0 in the regular season, won the ACC championship. Brock Glenn, a former Ohio State commit, third-string quarterback on Florida State because the backup is not on the team anymore. I believe. I don't think he transferred. I don't think he was hurt. But anyways, the backup didn't play. The third-string quarterback, Brock Glenn, true freshman quarterback, is the rust on the front street. He was more prepared for that moment in that game than Devin Brown. Yeah. I understand Devin Brown was injured part of the year, so he didn't get a lot of the reps that he may have gotten being the backup quarterback. But Ryan Day and Mike Norvell had the same amount of time. Actually, Mike Norvell had less because he was in the ACC championship when Ohio State was sitting on the couch trying to figure out where they would play in the bowl game. So I'm going somewhere, and it's why is your third-string quarterback at Florida State more prepared than Devin Brown, who has been at the program longer than Brock Glenn was at Florida State, who knows the offense better at Ohio State than Brock Glenn does at Florida State? Based off tenure, I don't actually know. Based off time on campuses, you should know Brown, know the offense better than Brock Glenn. But also, it goes into, does Ryan Day trust his arm? Because I watched Brock Glenn down there at Florida State, and I realized it was the Orange Bowl, and I realized they're probably planning on being down really early based on how good Georgia was, which was the reality of that game. When Ohio State really at times struggled to run the ball and offensive line struggled here and struggled there, I never saw Ryan Day trust Brown's arm once. So when I talk about unproven, it's not just what Jeff has said. Jeff took a little bit further. I always talk about throws and just pass attempts. I'm trying to be really nice. He has so many pass attempts in these amount of games. Jeff says we have no quarterback currently on the roster that has thrown a meaningful touchdown in college football. Maybe Ryan Day doesn't trust the quarterback's arms, which goes back to Jeff, the recruiting at Ohio State, and why it needs to get better. I cannot say what I want to say, Jeff. We're thinking probably the same thing. We're trying to keep it nice here, but the recruiting has to get better at this position. That's all I'm going to say there.
Yeah, you got to quit coaching. Like it looks like everything they learn is on 7-on-7s or on a whiteboard
But
or
that's what these
against.
kids are growing up on. They're growing up
Yep,
on
against.
7-on-7, and Ryan Day has
So
to try
that's
to
not.
change that.
Yeah, but it feels like he's like it's no different than college basketball. Like they're only recruiting these kids on these. He's cutting out the middleman. Instead of doing the work, he's going to the prep schools and he's doing all this. He's going to the guys that they tell him like, hey, this guy's a 4-star. Go check him out. If anybody on earth thinks that Devin Brown is a starting top 25 quarterback, you're out of your mind. No offense, Devin Brown. Like I think I want to put this out there. 10 times the athlete I ever was. I also wasn't a starting quarterback for a playoff contender. Like you're just not that dude. And whoever said it was, that's not your fault. I said the same thing about McCord. It is not your fault. You're put in a position, you're trying your best and you're doing what you can. But like for a high state not to have not to just have a dude on the roster and be like, I don't know, this dude, like for instance, Braxton Miller. A lot of people don't know this. Braxton Miller played for a small school down in Southern Ohio. Like I got a friend that his nephew played with Braxton Miller. This is not a prep school. This is not a giant. This is not Toledo Christian or whatever. This is a small school down in Wayne County, Ohio, that Braxton Miller, but he excelled at it. He was one of the best athletes anybody in that area has ever seen. But the key is they were able to be like, that dude is a baller. Ezekiel Elliott, same way, played for a small division school out in Missouri. Did not play a big time football program, but he was a standout and you're able to see the athleticism and get him to the team. Now we're doing the opposite. We're taking these guys, like, if anything, like McCord, for instance, playing with Marvin Harrison in high school is a negative because it's like, well, yeah, I could be a good quarterback with that dude. So it's like, you're not finding the diamonds in the rough. You're taking the easy way out. And, it's like Duke basketball for years. Coach K was like, I'm not doing one and dones. I'm doing it the way I was going to do it. He did that for about 5 years. And then he's like, never mind.
Right.
I want to go back to winning. So I'm going to go back and get the best athletes now. And they're going to be one and done. And I'm not going to care. And he won another championship. Like there's where we're at with Ohio State. Like you got to start going. You got to start getting the guys that stand out. You got to start getting the dogs, so to speak. We're told that Aaron Nolan, coming in. I don't know if Ohio State's ever had a guy coming in, maybe Terrell Pryor, that had so much weight on his shoulders as a young guy of like, you got to turn this around tomorrow. Pryor was able to come in. He was coming in after, Troy Smith, a couple down years. But like when Pryor came in, it was like, and again, Trestle of all people, everybody talks about, you talk about the Trestle old school and all this. Trestle was more advanced than anybody ever remembers because Pryor came in. He's like, okay, this kid is different than everything I've ever done. And I've got this other kid over here that does it the way that everybody thinks you should do it. But I see the future. And by the end of the year, outside of one bad play by Anderson Russell, they would have won, the Fiesta Bowl that year. And then Pryor the next year, beats Oregon, the next year beats Arkansas, and then the next year probably, would have contended for a national championship. So like, these are the people that you got to bring in. But what's on the roster now ain't it. Like, I don't know what else to say. Like, I'm tired. I can't, tiptoe around this. Like, it ain't it. Like, it's time to bring in some dudes.
We've been saying that since we've been doing this show together.
It's been too long that we've been saying it. So obviously it all falls. I mean, what else can you say? It falls on Day. Like, why are you not seeing the dudes? They got so fortunate and brought Justin Fields in, and for 2 years, like nobody owes Justin Fields more money than Ryan Day. I've said that all year.
Jeff, we need more time, man. We need a lot more time. Got to get you back on because I definitely want to hit the conversation I thought we had comparing Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia's rosters. Y'all want to wait for this one. We hit on it a little bit previously, but Jeff and I, we need an entire show, not 60 seconds to tackle that topic that might be coming your way here soon. You can follow my guy, Jeff Hunt, on Twitter or X, at JHunt006. You can follow me on the same platform at JStevens07. Jeff needs sports, the Off the Ball Network. You can find all of his work. He's a great host, great analyst of the football, and passionate about the Ohio State Buckeyes. We're out of here on the first hump day in 2024. We'll see you next time.